I started working with pottery as a sort of a night school, adult school, take one class every Wednesday while I was doing my day job. But I continued doing it. I loved it. And finally, when I retired, I was able to do it full time. And that was about 20 years ago. So before I did ceramics full time, I was a writer and editor, broadcast journalist, long ago, a teacher. Writing, editing, and ceramics are in a certain way similar. At least they give me a similar feeling. I'm not a wheel thrower. I'm a hand builder. So almost all of my pieces start with a slab. If it's going to be a piece, a cylinder, then I dry that slab to a certain hardness over something that's round. Otherwise, when I try to round it, it's going to crack. I'm sort of making a prototype of vases. So I made a slab, put it on a mold that is the same shape as the eventual vase, and we'll dry it to leather hard, it's called. The clay is hard enough to manipulate without it flopping around, but soft enough to still mold. You fire it to a low temperature just so you can work with it without breaking it. Then you do whatever else you're going to do with the glaze, with the skin, with coloring the piece. You then fire it one more time, hotter this time. So the glaze melts. The glaze has a lot of glass in it, makes it a hard piece, sturdy piece. And if all goes well, you're done. If it doesn't go well, you do something and put it back in. You scrape something off, or you add something. And in fact, those are really my favorite pieces, the ones that have layers of, it might be from a mistake or it might be intentional, but a layer of something new that usually shows the earlier layer through. So you have this buildup of history, of design, of color. Those are pieces I really like. Sometimes I use leaves or stones themselves to make impressions in the clay. So either I press leaves into the clay, into the soft clay, and then fire it, put a colorant on it, a stain on it, and that leaves the impression of the leaf. Sometimes I just put a colorant on the leaf and print with it. Sometimes I impress stones in the clay, soft clay. Sometimes I put stones on the finished product. So or grass or acorn tops. You don't realize how beautiful the impression is going to be. And that's one of the great things about ceramics is you don't know till you open the kiln how beautiful something may be or how awful it may be. But it's always a surprise to open the kiln. The difference between functional pottery and I guess all the rest is called sculptural pottery. Functional pottery is dishes and vases and things that you use. Sculptural pottery is, for example, art for the wall, like the piece behind me. So I do a lot of that, actually. And in fact, I've just started doing functional pottery again. To be food safe, a piece needs to be almost it needs to be fired as hot as the clay can be fired, that particular clay, because each clay can be fired to a different temperature. So if you fired it as hot as it can be, it'll be closed. And if you put a glaze on it, because the glaze has glass in it, it'll be closed also. So those are the things, either one or both of those things are necessary for functional wear. This is one of the plates I made when I moved into this studio. I only had brown clay and white glaze. So even though it was a really rich brown clay and a really delicious white glaze, I had to live with the constraints of having just one kind of clay and one kind of glaze. The other thing about this glaze is that you can see brush marks. So that's bad on a lot of pieces, but on this piece, it's perfect. And in fact, it's why I conceived of this piece, was to be able to see these brush marks in the center. This is one of the pieces that it's a very rare piece. I conceived of it. I made it. It looked like what I thought it was going to look like, and I liked it. This rarely happens. Almost never. You don't plan ceramics because it never turns out the way you think it's going to. That doesn't mean it's bad, but you're working with a lot of risk, a lot of uncertainty, no matter how many years you've been doing the same thing. One day it'll be different than the other day. I like the uncertainty in ceramics to some degree, obviously, because I keep making new things. A lot of people make the same thing over and over again. They're comfortable with it. They're happy with it. They stick with it. They have many fewer variables than I do. I make sculptural work. Then I make functional work. Then I use a different color clay. Then I use a different temperature in the kiln. I think I prefer to discover new things all the time. It isn't that I'm searching for something specific. I've made many things that I like very much. I've made plenty of things I don't like at all, but I've made many things I like very much, but I don't keep making them over and over and over again. They're pieces I love quite a lot, and when somebody comes to the studio to look at them, and they stand in front of a piece, and they're quiet for a moment, and then they say, I love that. That's a great moment. That's when you think, she gets me, he gets me. That's great. Sometimes I say that I'm inspired by nature, and then I think, well, that's dumb. Who's not inspired by nature? But when I think about the kind of ceramics work that other people are doing, in fact, this is quite particular. The fact that everything I see is pattern, texture, color, shape, and the relationship between and among those things. I think that is my particular inspiration, my particular way of seeing, my particular way of doing ceramics. I moved to Western Avenue Studios just about a year and a half ago. So I moved sort of in the middle of the pandemic, partly because this was a place where I could come and close the door and work. Other places were closed. And I couldn't have not worked for 2 years. I would have gone nuts. I wasn't unfamiliar with Lowell. We came up for the summer music series often, and restaurants, the Merrimack Repertory Theater. But since I moved my studio here during the pandemic, I really haven't. I guess cities are dynamic and interesting to me, and Lowell is a very dynamic and interesting city. So I am looking forward to getting out and about. Ceramics is a good medium because it's cheap. It can be cheap and accessible. You can make a pinch pot from clay at the riverbank and fire it in your oven a little while. You can get Sculpey clay, and fire it in your oven. So ceramics can be really accessible.